Former federal prosecutor who joins us on Thursdays, the great David Katz, everyone. Hello, sir. How are you?
Great to be with you, Mark.
Yeah, really, really great to have you in our midst. You know, there was something going on. I mentioned the beginning of the show, and then I have some stuff to show you that I think you'll enjoy. There is a sense that even as the legal walls close in on Donald Trump, certainly one of the most talked about candidate from the standpoint of legal issues and potential challenges, as those walls close in, the timing of the trials, even if they all come to pass, the documents case, the Georgia case, the J6 case, the timing is such that just the docket will favor Trump, that there will be delays, and just the slow nature of the bringing of these cases helps Trump enormously. Your thoughts?
Well, the dockets will help him. This is why some people thought that Merrick Garland should have gotten going or appointed a special prosecutor earlier. It seemed like it took the January 6th hearings in Congress to motivate him and to make him take more seriously just what a great threat to the democracy this was. I mean, we all saw the January 6th insurrection. We saw the attack on the Capitol. And I understand what they had to do, Mark. They had to work up through those hundreds of people. They did feel like they couldn't just leave them loose all over the country. Remember, they hadn't been apprehended. They'd just been basically shooed out of the Capitol. And so they had to get going on that case. But given the timing of the federal case and when the special prosecutor, Jack Smith, was appointed, you had this situation where if he brought this, let's say, Mar-a-Lago case, even in the next few months, I doubt it would get to trial in federal court, even if it were charging Trump. And it seems to me that would be the person worth charging. In the insurrection, I thought they might start with some other people. But likewise, the insurrection case, if they're going to charge Trump with inciting the riot, with being part of that seditious conspiracy, then I think that will probably also, as you say, not help regarding when the trial goes. In other words, he'll either get the nomination as the Republican candidate or he won't. And then remember, they have this rule, which they seem to respect and observe, which is that they don't make waves within 3 months of the election. You remember Comey, who was standing in as Attorney General because the Attorney General had recused herself because she'd met on the plane with the Clintons. And so Comey got to make the decision. Comey violated that rule and got all involved in the election within 3 months of it. But I don't think that Merrick Garland or Jack Smith will do that. They seem to be sticklers for the rules. And so that means that within 3 months of the election, there won't be anything. And so I think that that's the reality there. And then turning to New York City, that's been set for March, whether it would really go to trial in March. But even if it went to trial, even if it resulted in a conviction, I don't see a judge remanding Trump to prison before he's had a right to appeal. And his appeals would definitely go beyond November 2024.
So, wow, when you run that all out, you realize that it's likely, it's a remarkable thing that there were so many cartoons and columns that were accompanied by various caricatures of Trump in, the orange prison outfit and in cuffs and all these things, that there has been no real legal reckoning for Donald Trump through these years that have passed since his presidency ended. And it is likely that there will be no real legal reckoning. Please don't misunderstand me. I understand the E. Jean Carroll case wrapped, and he was found liable. But there, of the sort that I've just described, there is no real heavy legal reckoning for Donald Trump on the horizon.
Well, you'll remember during the campaign, Trump and his surrogate, General Flynn, were very fast to yell, "Lock her up, lock her up." But the reality is that's hooliganism. That's not how the rule of law works. We don't just lock them up. And so people are entitled to due process. And when it comes to someone who's in a high political position, a high economic position, and some people think that that's not really the rule of law. That's not being equal before the law. But let's be realistic. Someone like Trump is going to get as much due process as there possibly is. We used to always say when police officers were on trial, now there's some due process. Why can't our criminal defense clients get the kind of due process they're accused that police officers get when they're accused. You want to see due process in full flower? Look at the due process that the cops get in criminal cases, and look at what Trump is getting in his criminal cases. But that is actually, this is sort of a teaching moment too, Mark. And so sometimes I think it's very important to see that, we look at things like the rule of law, like the need for unanimity, like why we have reasonable doubt, this principle that our country was built on, that it's better that 10 guilty people go free than that one innocent person is incarcerated. It's easy to forget that sometimes when you get upset about people getting away with this or that, or crime on the subway, or whatever the issue is. But that's the principle that we were based on. And you have the satisfaction. I know a lot of people don't feel that we've had that satisfaction. They think that blacks, minorities haven't gotten an equal shake. But we like the idea of when you drive by a prison, you think no one innocent is in here. Of course, we know that that's not true entirely, but we're sort of built on that principle that 10 guilty people, better they go free than an innocent person be incarcerated, locked up for a long time.
Yeah, and in fact, you'll often hear that from those who argue against the death penalty, that I don't want to put to death someone who is an innocent person. There's breaking news. The Stuart Rhodes, the leader of the Oath Keepers militia, just sentenced to 18 years in prison. That's a big sentence. Now, he was convicted of seditious conspiracy, which you have taken us through and sort of said that's a tough thing to prove, just because I guess it's one of those things that doesn't have a lot of precedent for convictions in the law. But he was, again, this is all for that pro-Trump attack on the Capitol on January 6th, and now he's just been sentenced to almost 20 years. I wanted to ask you, in the context of that sentencing, we were talking yesterday, Kim and myself were talking about the guy who propped his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk, and, his day has come. And prosecutors were asking for 7 years. And Kim and I were both thinking like, it doesn't sound like a lot, especially when they knock down prison time, don't they, David? I don't know what the metric is, but, it's a third. You're paroled after a third, depending on the situation. So I wanted to ask you about sentencing in these cases and the sort of tepid sentencing we've seen for many of these people associated with the J6 riot.
Well, first of all, that's something that people are used to with the state courts, this idea of getting parole after a third of your time. They abolished parole in the federal system. So you get about 15% off for sort of whatever you want to call it, something kind of like good time, but it's not really parole. It's not like you come up before the parole board and you can get out after a third of your sentence. Pretty much in federal prison, you serve 85% of the stated sentence. And that was what was called truth in sentencing. This idea that somebody got 5 years and they were out in a year and a half. It was a Republican Congress that didn't like that idea, that pushed through this so-called truth in sentencing and got rid of federal parole. So when you see someone like Rhodes is going to get 18 years, he would serve about 85% of it. Now, the reality is that all of these guys, he's the first one of the Oath Keepers and the first one of the Proud Boys. He's the first one of that whole insurrectionary coup plotting, coup executing group that got sentenced. And what these guys are all waiting around for is for Trump to win again and to give them a pardon, which is disgraceful. People ought to get on Trump's behind right now, everyone who interviews him, I don't care if they're from Fox or where they're from, and say, you must repudiate giving a pardon to these folks. And if he doesn't, he should be hit over and over with it, because this is nothing but encouraging the insurrection and the coup and the end of our democracy after the fact. I believe there's compelling evidence that he did so and incited it before the fact, during it, refused to tamp it down for 4 hours while it was actually going on. And now he's doing the same thing by not clearly repudiating that he would give a pardon, say on the record in a way that it can be held against him over and over again, one way or the other. Either he says, I'm not going to give them a pardon, but right now they're going to all hang tough. They're going to not cooperate. And some of them apparently know something about, let's say, Roger Stone. It looks like Roger Stone would then be likely to flip. He doesn't want to spend the rest of his life in jail. Nobody wants to spend the rest of their life in jail, no matter how much they parade around as political prisoners, which is how Rhodes tried to portray himself today in court. So I think that, people may say, well, once a prosecutor, always a prosecutor. But I think if I'd have been the federal judge in that case, 18 years is about right The federal prosecutors asked for 25. He was the ringleader. He stood apart from the Capitol, but he gave clear directions during it. And then he met with the insurrectionists even after it happened that evening, and told them all kinds of encouraging things, and called them patriots and a lot of other things. Also, I think these folks thought that they had encrypted their messages. And of course, those people who think that they're going to be saved by how cleverly they've encrypted, there are some very clever people with the government who know how to unencrypt. And so he had some terrible emails, Mark, that he'd sent that were incredibly incriminating of himself, this Rhodes. And one last point, Pat Thurston and I used to talk about this case, and she called him one time a Yahoo. And I said he's actually a Yale-hoo, because he's had this amazing, tumultuous career where he's been in the military, but he's also gone to Yale Law School. And there's some kind of connection, too, with Ginny Thomas that people need to flesh all of that out. But he's had a really, I would say, tumultuous and sordid career, and he richly deserved this punishment from what I've heard. He's apparently been preaching violent insurrection against the United States and toppling our democracy for almost a decade, according to the prosecutors on the record today.
Well, that is kind of at the essence of what those guys do, those oath keepers, right? They're looking to overthrow stuff. And yes, tumultuous is a ding word. That's true. David, I'm thinking you made me think of Pat Thurston, who did buzz in earlier today to say this to Stuart Rhodes.
Ta-ta.
Yeah, later. The question I have for you is a little off. I want to show you something in a second. But before I get to the thing I want to show you that's related to trials, and it's sort of very American what I'm going to show you. You're probably aware of it, but maybe the members of the audience have not seen it. You worked in the big law firm that Merrick Garland worked in at the same time. Isn't that right? Or around the same time?
We worked there at the same time. And, it was at that time the largest law firm in Washington, D.C., Arnold and Porter. It's still around. And we represented Big Tobacco. I mean, we were a Democratic leaning firm. And it was the Reagan administration when we worked there together. And Philip Morris was a huge client. It also owned a huge beer company. And so one of the big issues of the day, we weren't mainly lobbying, although there were some people who did that kind of work. We basically represented Philip Morris and Big Tobacco in the many, many lawsuits that were brought against it. That was the reality of the situation. And no one had really sort of broken the ice against Big Tobacco. And certainly as a citizen, as an observer, I'm glad that they did. But obviously our job, representing Philip Morris, was to try to ward off and win those suits against Big Tobacco. But there was an interesting thing, and it's interesting to the budget crisis right now, because Reagan, of course, drastically cut federal taxes. That was, that along with standing up to the Soviet Union were probably his two big issues. When he said, get the government off your back, that mainly meant get the huge taxation rate off of incredibly rich people. And Nixon didn't take it off of them. Eisenhower didn't take it off of them. But Reagan took, the 70% that the billionaires of this world had to pay in those days. And they don't pay, obviously, anything close to a 70% federal tax rate anymore. But one of the ideas to make up the difference was what they called sin taxes. And that was to tax the hell out of things like cigarettes and beer. And so they're very regressive. And so as good Democrats, there is an argument against those regressive taxes because of how much they fall on poor people. And of course, the other side of it, this kind of missionary zeal that you were going to help them get off of liquor and tobacco by raising the cost so high. And it was easy to, present our side of it, right? But Merrick Garland was terrific. He wasn't the first person on Big Tobacco. It was the biggest client of the firm at the time, Philip Morris. And so, the most senior partner in the firm had them, and the third most senior partner worked on the case. And then, somebody else came along, and Merrick was maybe fourth on one of those cases, and I was maybe seventh on one of those cases. And I realized I wasn't going to get very near the courtroom. I mean, with people like, Merrick Garland being the fourth person on the case, how is the seventh person going to get into court or even take a deposition? That's how I decided to become an assistant U.S. attorney. And even though Reagan was the president, it was a very apolitical job being a federal prosecutor. And one last thing on it, of course, the priorities were not apolitical. Reagan just about got rid of the antitrust division. He lowered securities enforcement. that kind of thing. And so one of the interesting things when I went to Los Angeles as an assistant U.S. attorney in 1983 is he just collapsed the antitrust division. So all these guys who were used to doing very complex antitrust cases, 4 or 5 of them landed in the U.S. attorney's office and were given unarmed bank robberies because that was a federal crime that the Reagan administration did a lot of. We prosecuted just about every unarmed bank robbery. Like, it couldn't go to the DA's office, but it was prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office. The only good news was we got a lot of trial experience because if there wasn't a photograph, and I like the postal robberies because there was not photography inside the post office, so you were pretty likely to get a trial, right? Because there wasn't a photograph of the guy robbing the post office. So I did a lot of those postal cases. And then a postal.
Those are the good old days, David, when people robbed the post office.
And then, well, here people still rob the post office because there's money orders. They sell money orders, and a lot of people, especially in the minority community, still to this day can't get a bank account. And so when they need to do a financial transaction, they take cash to the post office and they buy somebody a postal money order. So then this poor lady who was a mail carrier, she got killed on her rounds, and I prosecuted the murderer and convicted him. So I did a lot of those cases for the post office. And of course, the post office was a big deal in those days before FedEx. It was a bigger deal back then. So thank you for letting me recount that history.
Welcome it was interesting. Very interesting, actually. And along the way, regressive is a ding word, and zeal is a seldom used, terrific, short ding word. Now, I want to share with David Katz and with all of you something that is associated with trials around which you have made correct predictions, but also have made interesting comments and analysis. And now the trials have all been associated with a growing cottage industry of merch that has grown up around the trials. Here's what I'm talking about. Around Gwyneth Paltrow's trial, her comment that supposedly she made, well, I lost half a day of skiing. That is on a shirt. It's also on a mug.
That's terrific, Mark.
I want to get one of those and send it to you, in addition to a Mark Thompson mug. There it is.
Thank you.
This is this is not an industry that has just emerged. There was always, in the modern era anyway, look at the Murdoch trial, Murdoch family law mug, blood on our hands since 1910. And around the O.J. Simpson trial, there were those free O.J. shirts. There it is, somebody wearing a free O.J. shirt. So the idea somehow that merch is a new thing, I feel as though the explosion in merch might be more representative of what's going on around various court cases. But the idea of merch is something that has been around for a while. So and if you're looking for this stuff and you're curious where you can find it, it's at getmarkmerch.com, everyone. No, it's at the Etsy store. So a lot of these things are on Etsy. But so I had to share that with you, David Katz, because I think it's really quite a sign of the times. We need, and there's also there was a Gwenacent. It spells Gwyneth Paltrow's name, but with Gwenacent on it. So there are a lot of these that really take flight during the trial, but then they have a little bit of a half-life after the trial too. So Can I tell you
a story, Mark?
Yes, please.
Is there time for a story? So I tried a case. My client was acquitted. And during the trial, which was down in Orange County, the court reporter had a mug on her desk that said innocent bystander. And the prosecutor gestured toward it during her closing argument, luckily unsuccessful trying to convict my client, and said, just like that cup, innocent bystander. That's what the defense attorney says. His client was just an innocent bystander. So I went up to the court reporter after the trial and I said, how many times has the prosecutor done that stunt with that mug on your desk? I said, will you put one there that says wrongly accused? And so I made a dozen wrongly accused mugs. And I asked her if she would put one on her desk. And of course, she refused. And I'm sure the judge probably told her, don't. The guy already got an acquittal. Now he's like, but I couldn't resist asking. I was hoping she would do it. And then I gave the other 11 to my friends. And a couple of them still have their wrongly accused, it had my phone number on the other side, but I didn't.
I love that.
There were only 11. There were only 11, but there are people
Oh,
who are wrongly accused, and I love it when I have a chance to represent some of them. That's one
that
of the
is just terrific.
That's one of the satisfactions of being a criminal defense attorney. And you see a guy like that, he's made a wonderful success of his life, and think where he would have been with a felony. So it's a lot of
No,
satisfaction.
of course that's true. I mean,
To have had those kind of cases.
particularly, there's so many ways in which the law can break against you, and we all need advocates probably in every way in our lives. And in the legal system, you really need a strong advocate, and it's great work that you do now as a defense attorney in that way. I will send you getmarkmerch.com stuff. I'll send you some stuff from our merch store. You can see it all around me. We've got tote bags. We've got but I think I see you in a mug easily. Well, we'll start you into things. Maybe a throw pillow. There's a throw pillow here. That might look good in the office. And then there it all is. So I think David should get a mug and a throw pillow. So that's in the works. And I'll search the net. If there's some kind of trial merch that seems right for you, I'll include that as well. But we love having you here on Thursdays, pal.
Mark, I have the photograph of the judge that I clerked for behind me. I have my Department of Justice. That's the Great Seal behind me. And then I also have my super lawyer's designation. But your merch is going to sit there proudly with those three items. Okay, when it gets there, I will post it up there behind me.
It's good company,
Mark. Kim,
all right,
well.
Great to have you with us, David Katz. There he is, and there is Katzadamus correctly forecasting the outcome of legal decisions. Now on this show, he doesn't miss. David Katz, everybody. Thank you, David.
Thanks so much. Great to be with you.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.